All right, so we are in the room, and Kroyler Gracie, welcome to the Charlie Vinch Show. And I'm so excited today to have you on as a guest to go over some really cool stuff with you. So we're gonna start, and I want you to first tell me about how you became, or how you're related to the Gracies, because there's so many different Gracies. So give us that background. What is Kroyler Gracie's connection with the Gracies?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, you're right. The Gracie family is gigantic and we multiply like bunnies. There's more and more of us every day. So I am Helio Gracie's oldest daughter's son. So I'm his grandson, directly his grandson. Royce, Rickson, Royler, they're my uncle. My mom is his oldest daughter. And I kind of grew up doing it, you know. I am from Helio's side, but you know, there is no such thing as Carlos and Helio's side. I know a lot of people like to do that to separate the family and stuff, but it's really just we're all one big family.
Yeah, why do people do that? Why do people try to like make that draw that line?
You know, why do people separate no gi versus gi? You know what I mean? Like it's all just jiu-jitsu. I think people want to feel like they're part of something special and part of something unique. You know, it's the same thing as like just teams, like in other sports too. It's the same sport, but you want to feel like you're, you know, part of something more exclusive. So people that are on Carlos's side, they're the Carlos all about, you know, and then there's the Helio side, you know, like it's all just jiu-jitsu. We're all same family. We're all related. There's no, you know, there's that's all just fabricated, I think.
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting. So there's no secrets that one side has and the other side doesn't.
No, that's, you know, I think it went back and forth. My grandfather and his brother were very, very close. In some ways, my grandfather saw his older brother Carlos as a mentor, a father figure, even at times, you know. And I think that the family kind of fell in line with that. Once Carlos passed, then they all fell in line with my grandfather, and my grandfather passed, and it was one of those things where now, because it wasn't just the two of them, you know, all of a sudden there were 20, 30 people wanting to lead the family, and then there's a separation there. But I think that the lines aren't as hard written as people outside the family think they are. You know what I mean? Like I think we all talk to each other. We have one big WhatsApp group where we all talk. Like there isn't, like there's no fighting, you know what I mean, like to the death or anything like that. I think a lot of that is just outside perspective.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. It's like a fabrication of you know, kind of like what people want to believe. They want to believe because by nature we're tribalist by nature, right? Like human beings
Right.
are. We want to feel like we're here and you're there, no matter what. And if when people tell me, no, I don't think like that, everybody thinks like that. It goes down to, do you eat breakfast? What do you eat for breakfast? You don't drink water. I do drink water. It's like,
Yeah, it's insane. And I think, you know, I mean, and to be fair, you know, jiu-jitsu, especially early on, you know, there was a lot of I don't know if egos are at word, but there's a lot of drive that was needed in order to prove jiu-jitsu's, you know, effectivity and to spread the word. So, you know, look, if the first generations of Gracies were a bunch of laid back, easygoing, you know what I mean, like peace and love people, it wouldn't have gotten as big as it did. You know what I mean? Like they wanted to prove, from Carlos, from my grandfather, from my uncles and cousins, you know, like everybody wanted to prove. And that kind of drive, right? You know, inspires people. That's why people wanted to learn. Originally wanted to learn from the Gracies, was because these people did it, like they proved it, you know. And then when you are learning from an instructor, it doesn't matter what kind of thing you're learning. It could be crocheting, right? And you almost idolize your instructor, like he is this source of knowledge that I need. And you start to compare your instructor, your source of knowledge to other instructors. And then, of course, and then that starts to create more rifts. It doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I mean, you're a black belt, you have your upper ranks in your school. How many times do you look around and see the white belts and blue belts going, man, who's really the best? You know what I mean? Like, but the upper belts, none of the upper belts care. You know what I mean? Like, they're just there. And I think because our family is in such of the center of the sport, that people do that all the time. You know what I mean? Like, if there's a disagreement, if so and so, lost at this tournament, or so and so did a seminar here, or they didn't go there, and then all of a sudden it blows up, more than what it really is.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's all just one thing, and people like to create the fabrications because it lets them feel a certain kind of way.
Right, they're part of something.
So why not just make it one big thing?
Because it doesn't feel as special. If we're all if we're all special, then nobody is.
All right, fair enough. Well, being that you are special and you had a special connection training with Helio Gracie, and did you train with Carlos also personally?
No, I never got to train with Carlos. I did train with my grandfather, but never with Carlos. And I think, Carlos passed shortly after I was born. A couple of years. I think I was maybe 4. When he passed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never got the chance to train with him. I actually can't say I can truly remember seeing him live. You know what I mean? Like, I was just far too young. But I did train with my grandfather. That's who I first started training with, him and Royler at Gracie my time in Rio.
Well, tell us a little bit about what it's like to train with Helio Gracie. Like, what was that like, man?
It was weird because, a lot of the training happened at home. We had a big farm growing up. My grandfather lived in a farm, and he had a pretty decent sized home gym where he would have private students and people, and a lot of my training happened there, because we were about an hour and a half from Rio at that point. And my grandfather would make trips to this school maybe 2-3 times a week at the time. But the rest of the time was at home, and when I was at home, it was mostly just playing. Like, there wasn't, it's hard to explain. Like, it wasn't like he's like, oh, we're gonna learn jiu-jitsu now, and we're just playing, just have fun. Like, we'd come out and just do this thing. And then, as I got older, 8, 9, I started putting a lot of pressure on myself, maybe more than anybody in my family ever did. And I think that's kind of natural. I think a lot of my cousins will say something similar to it, where we felt that it was our turn. Like, it was my turn to, like, at 8 or 9, I felt like it was my turn to wear the mantle to, like, protect the family, and the reality is, as my cousin Neiman puts it, the Gracies already proved all that they had to prove. Now it's the individuals. They can achieve the greatness in their own right, but it's not about proving that the family or that the art, was this thing. But when I was younger, that was a lot of pressure I put on myself. And I remember training even with family friends that would come to visit. My grandfather would have us put the gi on and go roll around at the academy. And I remember taking it so serious. Like, it was just like, I need to win. Like, there was this desire, and it just, he was young and immature. I was 8 or 9, so I think I can be forgiven.
Do you think that the way that you grew up learning jiu-jitsu in that kind of atmosphere is the way that younger kids should be introduced to jiu-jitsu, like through play first?
Oh, absolutely. At 100%. In fact, I think that when we have fun doing anything, we learn better. It could be anything. It doesn't matter what subject, what sport, martial art, skill you're trying to acquire. If you're not having fun, you're gonna see it as a chore. You're gonna hate it. You're gonna resent it, and that will ultimately keep you unmotivated and stop your ability to absorb knowledge. I think if you're having fun, and if you things if you're having interest in them, if you like what you're doing, then you want to do more of it, and then by default you get better, which then makes you feel even better about yourself. So yeah, I think children, they should come into jiu-jitsu as fun, not as something that they have to do. But I think that it takes really good parents or a really good instructor to create an environment where we're having fun together. Not you have to go there and it's fun for you, so you go do this. You know what I mean? That's not fun. Like it has to be real, like a real environment of that propels that growth.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that we do in our studio for the 3 and 4-year-olds, especially, is we do a lot of the same moves kind of over and over. But as long as we see a huge smile on their face and they are like with confidence and they're high-fiving us, and for me, I know, like you said, as long as they're having fun, they'll want to come back and they'll progress. And some parents have even said to me, I want to see my kid have more moves and more structure. And I always ask them, I said, did you bring them here for confidence and have fun? Or do you want them to go through A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, because that makes you happy? It's very different.
I think, if we look, I mean, and I'll I don't mean to sound bad if this comes across bad, but in America, a career in sport is far more common than in Brazil, where I grew up in. So I think like it was a shock to me when I moved here. When I moved here, I was near high school. There would be kids that were wrestlers that wrestled their entire life. Like they were in clubs and teams and soccer clubs, baseball clubs, and they're traveling gymnastics. I mean, like that parents would spend, a fortune throughout the lifetime of their children. And that's all they would do. Like that they had to do that. And I always thought to myself, I was like, man, okay, if there is such a high level training and a lifelong of training for these kids, why aren't they all signing with like the pros? You know what I mean? Like, and then the reality is not that they couldn't, but there's a huge burnout rate in America, because kids stop having fun. They're pressured into doing what they have to do. And I think that there needs to be a balance. I think we need to deliver the highest level of instruction that we can, but never at the cost of reducing fun and the engagement of the student. You know what I mean? Like, and I think kids are easy to do because you'll know if they're happy or not right away. You'll see a smile, but I think the same applies for adults too. I want my students in my class to all have fun. You could be 55 years old, be 110 years old. I want you to come in here and have fun. Because if not, you're going to hate it. And then if you hate it, it'll eventually trickle down to a point where I will hate it, and I didn't realize that at first. So when I was 15, I started teaching adults class when I was 12 years old. I was too young to be teaching adults class, but I was teaching at 12. And by the time I was 14, 15, I was opening and closing the school by myself. I was instructing full classes, like I was doing everything. I shouldn't have been. I was too young, but I was capable enough in a grappling situation that if somebody visited the school, I could represent well, I could teach well. So the people didn't want to learn from me. You know what I mean? Like, imagine if you walk in, you've never done this before. Let's say maybe you wrestled in high school. You come in and you see a 14-year-old teaching the adult class. Like that's the person that's going to teach you today. Like you're not going to want to learn that. Sure. And instead of me taking the approach of let's have fun together, let's have an exchange of ideas, let me show you what I know, and then we can both progress together and kind of grow together, which I think is a very healthy environment, very healthy way of teaching. I took it as I'm going to prove it to him. He needs to learn from me. And for a 2 to 3 year period, maybe it's 16, 17 years old, I made it was like a killing ground. You come to my school, like I would line you up at the end of class, line up all the students, and I would say, all right, I got 10 minutes, I'm gonna tap everybody. And I would say it out loud, let them know that this was to prove it that I could. And my school didn't grow very well during that time period. You know,
Surprise.
imagine that. You know, and it took meeting a few people in my life to change that, to turn that around. A few people that they didn't come out and said that what I was doing was wrong. They showed it to me. You know what I mean? Like they through their behavior and their way of thinking, it influenced me to change how I saw things. And I realized around 16, 17 years old that I was not having fun. You know what I mean? Like I was not enjoying coming to teach. Like I would come to class and I'm like, okay, well, I'm a little sore here, a little sore there, but I got to buck up because I got to do it tonight. You know what I mean? Like I got to beat up everybody tonight. And
Mm.
because I wasn't having fun, there was no way my students were ever having fun. And as soon as I changed the mindset when I was like 16, 17, man, like school blew up, tons more students. You know what I mean? Like I was happy. I was coming in here. I was looking forward to it. You know what I mean? And this had nothing to do with my love for jiu-jitsu. It had more to do with the environment that I had created, right?
Yeah.
So I think for anyone that's listening, if you're an instructor or you're looking to be an instructor someday or to run a school, please don't make a mistake like I did. You know, come
Yeah.
in and have fun. You know what I mean? Like make sure your students are having fun, and if everybody's having fun, there's no way that you'll fail. You know, people want to be around people that are happy.
Kroyler,
So
that is such like an essential thing that I hear all the time. And people come into my school and they say, how are you so happy all the time? How are you so upbeat? How are you so, positive? And I'm just like, that's just who I am personally. Like, that's who I am as a human being. So my enthusiasm here in my life just blasts onto the mat. So when people see that, they're like, I love that. And I always say, teaching is not for everybody. And correct me if I'm wrong. If you are not an enthusiastic, outgoing person, there's no shame in saying, you know what, teaching probably isn't for me.
right, and I think that's true. I don't think everyone can teach. Let me rephrase this. I think anyone can learn to teach, but I don't think teaching is for everyone.
Yeah.
So, like I think I have a couple guys at my school here that are incredible teachers, and in a group scenario, they do a really good job, you know, engaging the class and keeping the class motivated and paying attention to everyone, but they don't do so well in a one-on-one. You know, I have people that you look at them, you're like, man, that there's no way that person could ever teach a class. But then you get into a one-on-one with them and they're phenomenal. I have guys here that they don't look like they're outgoing at all, and then you put them in a group, an adult group class, they would completely bomb it, but all of a sudden they fit really well with kids. One of my kids instructors has 4 kids. It's a super quiet guy. You have no idea. He never talks, never says anything out loud. Like if you don't know him personally, you think he's kind of quiet. And then when you put him in a kids class, he just shines. You know what I mean? Like, so I think certain people have a skill set or maybe an innate ability to do certain things. And I think while you can learn the skills to teach, you not everyone is suited to teach every class, and not everyone is suited to teach. And that's okay. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I think everybody's skills together make the team. It's not any individual person. So
Sure. No, collective, right?
Right. And like I know the areas that I'm strong at, and I know the areas I'm not strong at. And as long as I have somebody in my team that can back up my weak areas, I'm good.
Yeah. And to highlight your other point, nobody wants to train with a dud. And I don't mean a dud like jiu-jitsu wise. I mean like a personality dud. Like somebody who's like spaced out,
yeah. And that's, you know what? And I'll be honest, that's the toughest student to teach to. Is the student that you talk to them and they don't say anything. Yeah, they just look at you. And I've had to ask, sometimes I'll ask people like, you liking class?
You okay?
Cool? Yeah. You don't. Oh yeah, I'm having a blast. Really? Okay. All right. If you're having a blast, then I'm having a blast. So
Not like glazed look, right? That like,
yeah, no, it's just, like, and I travel, like I've done, lots of seminars, and sometimes I'll even do private classes. When I go to do a seminar, I'll come in a little early or something like that. And every once in a while, I will run into somebody who the instructor tells me, hey, this person is really into jiu-jitsu. They really love it. They're looking forward to it. And I'm like, great, this is going to be like a super exciting class. And the person just sits there like the lights are on, and I'm not quite sure that everybody's home, but they engage. Like they're obviously, taking the material in, they're asking smart questions, but they're just not, as you put it, they're not super outgoing. Those classes are hard because you never really know if they're happy or not until you come out and say, hey, are you having fun? Like literally ask them.
well, everybody's different. And like you said, not everybody's meant to teach. But when you do find that teacher that is outgoing, who's like a charismatic ball of energy, which every Gracie I've met is totally like that, man. You guys have like an addictive energy to want to be around. And I
Thank you.
think
I
that that's
appreciate
what
that.
separates, listen, I think that's what separates a lot of, we'll say, good instructors and successful schools than not. Listen, there are plenty of world-class guys who, could not maybe teach even a good class, let alone even have a personality to want to teach other people. That doesn't take away from their skill
Right.
set, but that makes
Right.
them a really bad instructor. And
Yeah.
Sigmund Freud talks about whether you know it or not, your internal dialogue will ooze out into everybody else, whether you know it or not. So if your internal dialogue is, I'm not enthusiastic, I hate this, this is horrible, I'm awful, it's just gonna.
Right. I 100% believe that. Just look at like, I'm sure you've had the situation where somebody comes into your school and, usually it's like a teenager that comes in and they're kind of quiet and shy and meek, and 6 months go by and all of a sudden it's a whole different person. You
Oh
know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, and that person really didn't change, but maybe how they viewed themselves changes internally without them being aware, and that carries on their voice, their posture, their actions, the how way that they walk, like dress, like everything. Yeah, I've never heard that quote from Freud, but I 100% believe it.
Yeah. All right, so let's switch gears here a little bit. You are a scientist and you have a biology background, is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, I have a
Can you
degree in
give me
biology.
the exact title of what you have so I don't mess it up?
I have a bachelor's in biology and a bachelor's in chemistry. I double majored in college.
Mhm.
And I have a couple minors, but nobody counts those. So and I, outside of owning my school, I work at a laboratory as well.
Wow. Okay, so can I ask you this question?
Yeah,
Um, the Is it okay if we talk about COVID?
absolutely.
Okay. Being that you have a background in biology, um, what is one of the most important things that we must all know as human beings on this earth about this COVID thing going on
Um,
that you believe to
first,
be true?
so my first thing is, it's like viruses and pandemics. They're not new, right? The reality is, if you look historically, there's a major pandemic or a new virus that scares people and is very dangerous. Every 50 to 100 years, there's always one. If you go back and look from the dawn of man, and this is part of nature. We adapt as humans. Animals adapt to their surroundings. Viruses and bacteria and things like that, they do the same thing, right? So it's not, the idea of a pandemic is not new. I think the thing that was scariest about this, and I think the thing that caused people to panic or react to this more strongly than anything else, is how fast it transmitted. And how fast it transmitted was due to a number of different factors. Like, transportation has never been easier now than it's ever been. If you think about it, 50 years ago, a trip to Japan or a trip to China, a trip to Russia, to any other part of the world would take days. You know, you would fly somewhere, you'd stay overnight, fly somewhere else. You know, if you look back 100, 150 years ago, if you went across the world, it might take weeks, which lessened the transmission rate. Where now I can take a flight from Chicago and be in Japan by tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Like, so the ability to hit different parts of the world is far easier to do now than before. The second thing is we weren't ready. You know, you can't prepare for something that you don't know exists, you know. So it would be like if I had a new submission that nobody's ever seen before and I came out and rolled, like, it's not that the submission is deadly, it's just that you're not ready for it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, and I'm not saying that COVID isn't deadly. COVID is deadly, but I think if we were better prepared, if we knew it was coming, if we had time to truly be ready, and the reality is in science, 2 months, 3 months, that's nothing. That's
Right,
not time.
right.
I
Right.
mean, we were talking about like 1.5 to 2 years. So if we had time to prepare and be ready for it, and we knew that it was coming and all these things, we could have avoided a lot of the fear to the contagion rate, how fast it spread. So I think all in all, the best thing we can do that we can be aware of is just use common sense. You know what I mean? Like, if you know you have a weak immune system, don't go around people that, you know, that are sick. And this is just in general. It doesn't have to be for Corona.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
wash your hands. You should wash your hands.
Right. You know, go bathe after class so you don't get ringworm. Like,
You should take a shower after class.
Like, that's common sense. But my grandfather used to say that common sense was like deodorant. You know, the people that need it most use it least. And
that's a good one. We're gonna put that on a shirt.
I should, yeah.
We should put that on a shirt.
Yeah, you know, and it's true. You know what I mean? Like, how many times, like, I mean, even, it's gonna sound silly, but like, let's say you're eating food and it falls on the floor. You're like, oh, 3-second rule, you know, or, oh, it's not fast enough, 10-second rule, oh, 30-second rule. And I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's just, I think we have become so accustomed to being safe, and that we don't feel the need to use common sense.
Yeah.
So as an example, one of the difficulties in jiu-jitsu in America is the idea of teaching self-defense, right? Not that it's not needed, but that people don't think they need it, right?
Sure.
And in America, it's a really good point to argue. You can carry guns. The police response is fast. There's people are usually nice. They're looking to help you. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. But then when you talk to anybody from Brazil, self-defense. Like, I came in not to have fun, not to do a sport or be competitive. No, I came in because, like, somebody's going to beat my ass later today. Like, I needed to learn to protect myself. Because the reality is, in Brazil, things are a little bit more violent than they are here in America.
The rest of the world.
Sure. Yeah.
The rest of the world.
So I think it's again, we've become so accustomed to the safety and the access that we have that we underestimate certain things. You've been to Mexico before, yeah?
I've been to Mexico. I've been to Brazil. I've been to Europe. I have been a lot of places.
So have you ever heard of Montezuma's revenge?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's when you drink the water in Mexico, right?
Yep.
And okay, so like, when, you know, I take a lot of trips with my friends. Like, when we went to Mexico for one of the camps I do there, I told all my students that are coming with me, hey, don't drink the water. Like, it's not good for you. Oh, what do you mean don't drink the water? Just don't drink the water. Like, when you brush your teeth, use a bottle of water, you know, or if you don't, just when you're showering.
We had to do this, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I didn't know if you experienced the same thing. When my wife's from Paraná, and when we traveled down to Santa Catarina, like Floripa, we're so far off the coast and so down south in Brazil that even when you turn the water on, you can smell, it smells.
Right.
Yeah. And my wife's like, don't brush your teeth with that water. There's bottled water. And I'm like, wow, this is like a different life. But go ahead.
No, but that's exactly my point. So like, if all you've ever known is I can just open the faucet and drink that water, and then you go somewhere where that's not the case, right? And you don't take the proper precautions and you drink that, then you get sick, but then you're like, well, none of the Mexicans get Montezuma's revenge. Sure, but they've adapted.
They've adapted. They've done it their whole life.
Right. That's a whole different thing. And the reality is, because of the safety in America, whether it's for illnesses, for injury, from assault, from theft, it's caused most people to assume that that is the norm. And the reality is, America is far ahead than most countries when it comes to that stuff.
Oh yeah.
And if anything, America is the exception on those things, not the rule, not the norm. So I think when Corona hit and everybody's like, oh my God, it's ravaging China. Oh, it's not going to happen in America. Again, generally speaking, you're probably right, except we weren't ready. So and I think people underestimated because of that. Here's an example of something maybe illuminates my point a little bit better. When I was very young, when 9/11 happened, I was in Brazil still, right? So I was 12 or 13 years old when 9/11 happened. And I remember, I'll never forget this. I think everybody remembers where they were when 9/11 happened, right? I think there's nobody that you can ask that won't remember. I was in my school library, and they turned the TV on, and you saw the footage of the the tower on fire, and then immediately after you saw the second airplane, right, hit the second tower. And I remember when it happened, people in Brazil didn't know how to react because it was seen as an act of war. And I remember thinking, because my image of America was, nobody messes with America. Like, you guys have the best army, the best technology. Like, you guys will just destroy whoever's responsible for this, right? And as a 12 or 13-year-old, that was my understanding of it. I didn't understand the politics. I didn't understand this war is never simple, right? So, but as a 12 or 13-year-old, I'm like, oh, they're gonna catch whoever did this in a week. Can't mess around. The Americans aren't gonna mess around. They're just gonna say, give it to us, or we'll do whatever. And that was my idea of it, but the reality is, I wasn't in America when that happened. I didn't see the fear that came through America. I didn't see the banks shutting down. I didn't see people buying supplies because they thought World War III was here. I didn't understand, that it wasn't as easy as just bombing a country to get the solution you needed. Like, I was too young and too unaware. And I think with Corona, the thing that scared the most is we were mostly, as a general population, unaware of what it could do.
Yeah.
So,
and like you said, nobody knew it was coming, just like
right.
that, and how can you be prepared for something if you don't know what's coming, right? Like, you can only be so prepared.
Right. And if we're accustomed to always being ready, and all of a sudden we're not, it's hard to believe that we're not.
It's a shock to our ego, right? We're like, I thought
Absolutely.
I was ready, but I guess I wasn't.
Right. There's nothing worse than thinking you're a badass, then you walk into a school and then there's somebody else that there's nothing worse than that.
And listen, it's kind of good for you. I mean, natural disasters are not good, good for you and
Right.
this and that. But going into a school and thinking that you're better than you are, and basically getting your ego checked, I think that's happened 100%. To me. It is a great thing. It is a really, really, really good thing.
Yes, and I think that the day it stops happening, one of two things has happened. Either A, which is the positive outcome, is that you've become aware that everybody, you're human, you're chokeable, you're breakable, you'll have good days, you'll have bad days, and other people will do the same, and that you're human, you're not better, it's your jutsu against my jutsu on this day at this time, right? And it's a very healthy mindset to propel growth, because you you'll keep trying to improve. You keep trying to beat your previous self, and that's a positive outcome. Or option B, which is the negative outcome, is you hide. You don't expose yourself. You don't come out of your shell. You only roll with the same 2 or 3 people, you know. And if they become too tough, then you find another 2 or 3 people. So I think those are the only 2 times in jiu-jitsu where you won't feel that need or appreciation for that ego check.
Yeah. So you've been to Brazil. You've trained in Brazil before. I've been to Brazil. I've trained before at many of places, and people always ask me to like, they're asking me like, who's the best guy you roll with? Was it this world champion? Was it? Yep. And I'm like, yeah, they're great. And I'm like, but listen, there's this 15-year-old kid, or there's this 16-year-old kid you never heard of. You may never hear of him, and he was one of the best guys I've ever rolled with.
Amen. When I was in Brazil, not last year, but the year before, I took a few students out to Rio, and we went and trained the Gracie Mata. And my uncle was there, and I came in with 9 students. And he paired everybody up, and I was like, I'm gonna stay in every round. I want to roll as much as I can when I'm here. So I got brown belt, black belt, black belt, black belt, black belt, black belt, and I'm like, some of these guys, and they all started my size, and they got bigger. And I'm a big guy, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, oh man, like these guys just keep getting bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden, I got this like 130, 140 pound, mid-20s black belt there. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have a breather on this one. I mean, like, at worst case, I'll just lay on top of him and just kind of chill out for 5 minutes and recover. I had the toughest time, catching my breath. Like, the whole time it was like, I need to be engaged. I need to keep moving forward. I need to like put this guy on his heels because he's coming after me. You know what I mean? Like, and to be totally honest, I don't remember his name. I met so many people that day. I don't remember his name. I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I know that he's not somebody famous because I would have remembered him, but he was probably the toughest guy I grappled with the last time I was in Brazil.
It's some guy you never even heard of, who may never compete, who rolls 3 times a week, who is 20 years old or 16 years old. My experience was with a 16-year-old. This kid was unreal, man. Unreal. And all the other black belts were there like, did you roll with this guy? And I was like, yeah. They're like, it's not normal. They kept telling me it's not normal. And I'm like, no kidding. No kidding. I've experienced it.
Yeah, and I think it's good for us. I mean, it's good for everyone, So
Amen.
And it should happen. Like, it should continue to happen. Right. So if we look at like my grandfather and Carlos, right? So they spent, their entire lives to develop a number of jiu-jitsu techniques. And then their kids spent their lifetimes and then they expanded on those techniques, right? So by the time it gets to me and you and then like the future generations, like the research is more and more on the cutting edge than on the development side. So a lot of the development, the trial and error and that stuff has already been done. Now it's just a matter of perfecting, right? Yeah. And so I think the transfer of knowledge is faster now than it's ever been because of that. Because we don't have to troubleshoot how to armbar, simply on how to armbar better.
Yeah.
Right. And on top of that, communication's faster. The ability to see footage. Like, can you imagine, like, in the 1980s being a world-class competitor? You would go into a competition and have no idea who you're fighting or what they're likely to do or their games. You had no idea. Now you go on Instagram, you know somebody's entire game just by watching a 5-minute clip.
Yeah.
and you can prepare, or if they do something cool that you're not aware of, you can look to learn. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody won a tournament doing a specific technique, you can buy their DVD and learn it. You know what I mean? Like, so the transfer of information is so much easier, which means that the future generations will be at a higher level, a higher caliber, at a faster pace than the previous generation. I think that's normal. It's healthy.
Yeah. It's like you were talking about the way that we travel. is a lot faster now than it was before. Just like the
Right.
way we acquire techniques and information, it's almost like we're becoming superhuman. Like we're like in
Absolutely.
a video game. We're like strength, speed, flexibility, 10, 5, 6. You're like building your powers.
Absolutely. And that's exactly right. So imagine this, like even 20 years ago, right? You're a pretty big guy too. So imagine 20 years ago, you're looking to learn jujitsu. You look around the schools. There might be 2 or 3 schools in your area.
The fact.
And right. And then you walk in and they're all 120-pound Brazilians, like they have never seen a guy your size. But how do you develop a game?
I don't know.
Trial and error, right?
Yeah.
Now if you walked into jiu-jitsu school now as a bigger guy and you saw 120-pound black belt teaching, you're like, okay, I'll figure this out. But then it's so easy to then go home and go, man, okay, big black belts in jiu-jitsu, you know what I mean? Like, and then you can see how they play the game, how their styles may be different, that maybe suits their body style better.
Yeah.
And vice versa, So I think it's far easier to learn and to absorb knowledge today than it's ever been.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that it's a good idea for jiu-jitsu practitioners, whether they're white belts or black belts, to look at other world-class competitors and or great people in jiu-jitsu and start to like basically dissect their game and go, I could use that in my game. So should big people be looking at bigger people how to develop their game?
Yes and no. I think the first thing we should do is have like a introspective section and look at ourselves. Okay, what are our strengths? So I'm a big dude, but I'm not physically strong. Truly, I'm not. I can't lift a whole lot. I don't feel powerful, but I'm very flexible. So I'm very, very flexible for a guy my size. So if I'm not aware of the qualities and attributes that I have, I just look on aesthetics, right? And I look at somebody else that's big, they may be very strong and I may emulate the wrong thing. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I think before we look to emulate or to dissect other people's games, we need to be aware of, okay, where are my attributes? Where am I strong at? Where am I weak at? What would complement those things? And then yes, then you can look. Now, my rule of thumb with videos is if you're ever watching videos, you're always better off watching competition or tournament footage than you are technical breakdowns, to be honest. And the second part of this is it's not looking at specific techniques, but rather behavior and patterns of behavior. So as an example, I may watch a competition where somebody defends a leg lock a certain way. Then I come to my school and I don't ever need to do that because maybe my students aren't at a caliber where that defense is required, right? So how could I ever practice that and develop that if I don't need to, right? Well, I look at behavior pattern. If it turns out that at the highest tier, they're all defending this way, regardless of how good the leg lock is, they're defending this particular way, then that pattern has already been tried across the board by all these high level competitors. So I need to absorb that into my game. And then when I come to my school, I need to allow myself to get into a position where that defense is necessary, right? So it's not simply looking and going, oh, maybe I need that, maybe I don't need that. Look at the pattern of behavior. How are people passing guard? Why are most people knee slicing today? But if you look back 10 years ago, knee slicing wasn't the biggest pass, right? Why are people playing more De La Riva and butterfly guard today than they were, let's say, 20 years ago? So you look at those patterns of behavior and you start to realize that their behaviors are more telling than the specific techniques.
That's interesting. I'm going to take that into account when I watch. There's so many good guys I like to watch, so I'm going to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the matches I've quoted a lot recently in my podcast and a few others is Nikki Ryan versus Meow.
Okay, yeah.
right? In ADCC. If you haven't had a chance to look at that one, look at that one. I think it's an excellent match.
Okay.
Um,
What do you like about it?
is
What is it about that match that is like so striking to you?
so there's three things. One, the obviously the technical level of both competitors is through the roof. They're both very, very good. Two is the strategy of each competitor was vastly different, right? And their behaviors are vastly different. And the last thing was experience, right? Which experience is something that you cannot teach, right? You cannot teach experience. It doesn't matter if you don't feel it, if you haven't been there, it doesn't count. So one of the things that happens in that match is, you know, because of the rules, there's no points early on. So early on, Meow pulls guard, right? He pulls guard. He realizes, hey, you know, I can play my guard. Nikki will never pass my guard because I have one of the best guards in the world. And Nikki did an excellent job of almost engaging a lot. Well, at 5 minutes, that changes because at 5 minutes, now there's points involved. And so Nikki was smart enough to create a scramble at like 420, 425. He creates a scramble in which at a 5 minute mark, if Meow were to drop to his butt, it's points. Right?
Interesting.
So, and that's a strategy on Nikki's part to wait until it's closer to the time to start that scramble. Well, Meow, Meow with experience was like, oh shit, I'm in the middle of a scramble. The timer is almost up. And if I sit then, I'm going to lose points. So Meow actually pulls before Nicky Ryan does, and he threatens a sweep, right? Well, now the strategy has shifted because now what Nicky wanted to do to Meow, Meow is doing to Nicky. And Nicky raises his hands, and he raises his hands, he looks at the ref, and then he sits. And
sweep.
No, he did it right before the 5 minute mark. Like if you go back in that match, it was like 456, like seconds before. And he purposefully did the whole hands raised, looked at the ref to make sure there's no points involved. So like it was a brilliant strategy. But anyway, so the match goes, there's a scramble, and now they go out of bounds, they start on their feet, which when there's points involved and you start on your feet, generally speaking, the better wrestler is going to win that exchange.
Yeah.
And when there's only a couple minutes left, out of the two of them, and it's no offense to Meow, Nikki is the better wrestler. So with a couple minutes to go, Nikki's like, hey, we're out of bounds, we're in our feet, there's points involved, like that's a match, like I'm going to win this, right? And he starts threatening a takedown, and Meow sits, he gives up 2 points. And I was like, what is he doing? You know, like that's not good. Like at least try to create a scramble into the ground.
Sure.
And Nikki had to commit to the takedown now. He had to like go down to get the points.
Right.
And as he engages, Meow not only gets a sweep, but gets his back and time runs out. And he wins, I think it's like 5-2 or something like that. So
wow. That easily could have went the other way.
Absolutely. But this was experience, right? This was experience from Meow to think to know, hey, I can't beat him on his feet, but I can goad him into thinking that he can do something or he can score more, and I can take advantage of that inexperience. And it's no knock on Nicky either. He's a phenomenal grappler, but he's still young. He's still kind of green, you know?
Yeah.
And Meow has been, you know, a veteran for 10 years, you know, that makes a big difference. But when we look at the examples of patterns of behavior versus technique, that same mentality of the point scoring and playing the rules versus the actual jiu-jitsu was prevalent in the entire ADCC tournament, right? So that's what I'm saying is like you have to look at the pattern of behavior. So in the entire tournament, other competitors did the same thing where they were playing the rules, not jiu-jitsu, right? So the techniques that they were doing weren't necessarily the right techniques, but they were better suited for that rule set. You know, so if you're looking to coach somebody into ADCC, or you want to go compete in ADCC yourself, it's not about learning every technique. It's about learning those behaviors that are going to get you to be successful in that rule set. So it's like I said, to me, it's more valuable to look at patterns of behavior than actual techniques.
Wow. That is an incredible breakdown and so true. I think of when you say that, my mind immediately goes from the early days of Pride to the cage in UFC, because what you could do in Pride and the way that you would win in Pride may not be a great crossover to the cage in the UFC because the rule set has changed, but also the circumference of the area of where you can move and how you can move has also changed. It widens. Whereas when you're in the ring, it's very hard to pressure somebody up against the ropes and take them down.
Right. Or stand up. It's much harder to stand up in Pride than in the UFC. Yeah, no, 100%. And that's why when the UFC bought Pride and you saw those guys move over, like, I don't think any of them did really well. I think Anderson Silva was the only one that came from Pride that truly did really, really well. Everybody else struggled.
Oh, Wanda.
And yeah, Vanderlei. Yeah, but again, he didn't have that rising, you know what I mean? Like, he kind of like plateaued after a while, you know? Yeah, but yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think you're right.
Always about like which arena are you fighting in and what style is that going to favor? So when I used to fight MMA, especially amateur MMA, they would put you in these cages. I swear they were like 5x5. So who do you think that's going to favor, the striker or the takedown jiu-jitsu guy? Who's that going to favor?
Right. You know, with a 5 foot, you know, if we're caged in a 5 foot, probably the grappler.
Of course, because the striker can't back up enough. One step, he hits his back on the cage.
Right. And once you close the distance, it's over.
But then you take guys who are really good in the takedown jiu-jitsu area in those small cages. And then as soon as they graduate out of there and they have to go to that big one at the UFC, usually the crossover is not good because you're like, oh my God, I have to cover so much distance now to try to take this guy down. Now I'm tired. So they've changed the game plan because they were so used to being in one setting.
Right. I have a student who's fighting the UFC. He just got picked up October last year, I think, and he fought in the main event a couple months ago. And he's a big striker. I mean, he knocks people out. He hits like a, you know, like you wouldn't believe. But anyways, he's beating this guy up, and this other guy was also a striker, but he's fought in the UFC before. So this guy like shoots a takedown, and my student got taken down like 3 times. And it's funny because like every time he's looking back behind him because he thought the fence was closer. And all of a sudden it wasn't, because he wasn't used to the much bigger area. You know what I mean? Like, and he was assuming that, yeah, this guy is looking to try to shoot, but the fence is behind me, and all of a sudden it wasn't. So, you know, absolutely, you have to train for the rule set. You have to train for the environment.
Yeah. And matching the environment with where you're going to be competing and how you're competing is essential, right?
Right. You know, if you want to be, you know, a world champion in no gi, you can't be training the gi, you know, 5 days before the competition. Unless you're Marcelo Garcia, but that's different. He's the exception that proves the rule.
There's always an exception, right?
Right.
Of course. All right. So before we end, Kroyler, I always ask my guests now at the end of my show, what is black belt mindset to you?
Ooh, I think the black belt mindset is having the idea, not idea is not a good word, but having the belief, and I mean a true belief that you can adapt and overcome. I think that one thing that is, you know, undeniable in jiu-jitsu is that any position can be turned around. You can turn anything that's bad that's happening to you into a good thing. There's always a way out of something. You may struggle at first. You may not quite know how to deal with it at first, but it can be dealt with. It can be overcome. And I think once you understand that it doesn't matter what problem life presents, you can turn it around and you can choke it out. You know, then life becomes easy. You know, and I think that's something that's helped me have a very peaceful life, is knowing that there's nothing I can't handle, you know.
Nice. I like that, man. And that's a good note to end on. Thank you so much for coming on. I'll talk to
All
you
right,
soon.
man.
Later.
Thanks for having me.
You
Bye.
got it, brother. Peace.